This is No Credentials Required, powered by Belly Up Sports and a part of the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Corey Mansfield and Ryan McCarthy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 22 of No Credentials Required. We are powered by Belly Up Sports and a part of the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. And with me, I've got our snowbound co-host, Corey Mansfield. Corey, how are we doing tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing okay. Just looking out the window and seeing that the snow stopped. So not much shoveling to do. So that leaves more time for play.
Yeah. We both live in the same kind of region in upstate New York, around the Clifton Park, Saratoga, Half Moon area. So we're getting some snow right now, but we're supposed to get about 3 to 6 inches. I mean, it's not the 3 feet we got a month ago.
No, it's not. And at least they didn't misjudge this one.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just happy we're not getting 3 feet in a matter of 10 hours like the last time. So we got a lot to talk about tonight in a short period of time. So let's get started. Corey, let's talk about the playoffs, the NFL playoffs. We haven't really touched upon the NFL that much this year, this season, for a myriad of reasons, because a lot of other shows cover the NFL. But we both want to talk about the playoffs from this past Sunday. And we also want to talk about the new Jets head coach, because we're both Jets fans. Talk about the new head coach. So let's start with the playoffs first. Corey, this next 2 Sundays from now, we'll have the Super Bowl between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's talk about the games on Sunday. What surprised you? What did you kind of expect? What was your reaction to the games?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, and I think it's the obvious, is Tom Brady making it to another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the beginning of the season when he left the Patriots last year. It was what was the reason the Patriots were always successful? Was it Belichick? Was it Brady? Was it a combination? Mm-hmm. And right now, it looks like it was Tom Brady was the reason that they were so successful. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about leading another team to the Super Bowl. And if he wins the Super Bowl, I mean, honestly, we're both Jet fans. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. I don't care what anybody says. The numbers support it. I mean, people don't like him because maybe his demeanor, but the stats support it. The on the field play support it. And it's interesting because you look at this matchup. It's this 43-year-old quarterback veteran who's the greatest of all time. And then you have this, 25-year-old young gunslinger, who's suddenly the new wave of the NFL. And it almost is going to feel like a changing of the guard. Like if Mahomes goes out there and beats Brady, it's like, okay, the torch is being passed to this new generation of quarterback, and or to Mahomes being the next, the great quarterback. But overall, I mean, hey, the Bucs, they knew what they needed to do to get to the Super Bowl this offseason. I mean, kudos to their front office staff for putting a team together, going out, getting Brady, going out, making some good draft picks, getting Gronk to come out of retirement, picking up some pieces here and there and getting there. I mean, and the Packers just, Matt LaFleur has a lot to go over this offseason. So,
yeah, it's particularly the last couple minutes of the game was pretty crazy. I mean, especially for the for the call that LaFleur made on 4th down. The Packers are driving. They're down by 8, so they could easily tie the score. But Matt LaFleur definitely has a lot to think about, and that decision is going to haunt him. And another decision that's going to haunt them is Aaron Rodgers. He had a ton of room on 3rd down. He's scrambling. He's trying to get out of the pocket. He's got a ton of room to run, and he doesn't run. He winds up throwing the ball away. Those decisions are going to eat at both LaFleur and Rodgers for the entire offseason. I mean, if you were in that same position, would that kind of thing eat away at you as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you think about the Packers, they've had some really good teams over the last, 10, 15 years. And this team, it was, they were, unsure how they were going to do. They were going to be better than they were last year. And then obviously, to this to happen. But the thing about Aaron Rodgers is I've watched Aaron Rodgers play for, a majority of his career. He's always this guy that kind of, he likes to step up to the line of scrimmage and make play. He kind of scrambles out up to the line of scrimmage and then throws the ball once the coverages start to come up, especially the linebackers coming up if he's going and it's you got to wonder if he was hoping that somebody was gonna, break coverage and or come back on their route and he could hit them for a first down that situation instead of running
Right.
it and then ultimately
Right.
just throwing it away. But the time for him is he going to be a Brady? Is he going to play till he's 43? Probably not. The window for him to get another Super Bowl is shrinking very quickly.
Yeah, it's closing very quickly for sure. Do you
And
think he
then
moves on to another team though?
I don't think he does. I think I don't. When you look at him in terms of his legacy with the Green Bay Packers, you look at Favre. Favre left, played for what, four teams. Played for
He
the
played for the Falcons, the Packers, the Jets, and the Vikings.
yeah. So he played for four teams. Rodgers has just been a Packer, so he could be a lifer with the Packers and really, solidify himself as the greatest quarterback in their history. I mean, no disrespect to Bart Starr, but obviously Aaron Rodgers, it's a different era. And if he wins a Super,
Statistically speaking, yes, absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, if I think he wants to stay there, I think he will stay there. Because I don't think changing a team and late in his career is going to help him. New system, new coach, things like that. Obviously, he had a new coach this year, but a new place, new organization. It's tough. I mean, Tom Brady did it, but Tom Brady's Tom Brady. And, I mean, he's just everything he touches seems to turn to gold. So
Here's the crazy thing about Tom Brady is that he and I are. Let me look up his date of birth real quick. Let's see, Tom Brady, football quarterback, according to Wikipedia.
thank you, Wikipedia.
We're 17. We're Tom Brady and I are literally 17 days apart. So he was born August 3rd, 1977. I was born August 20th, 1977. Please don't take my identity, but but it's the funny thing is like we're both the same age, and he's accomplished so much more than I could probably ever accomplish in my entire life as far as football goes. I mean, my football credentials are I played I think 6 seasons of flag football, and that's pretty much it. Tom Brady has played 21 seasons in the NFL, is on his way. He's played in 8 Super Bowls, going on 9 now, which is almost a fifth of all Super Bowls played all time. And it's crazy. His statistic, he's a performer. He just performs. He's such a clutch guy who, when it comes to game time and you need something and you need to have something done and you need to have something and you need a win, he's the guy you want to go to, which is crazy. So and now the Buccaneers are the first team in NFL history to host a Super Bowl in their stadium. I mean, how nuts is that?
How are you not going to be biased in that situation if you're the Bucs? I mean, you have to pretty much, you have to paint both end zones, each team. You have to. I mean, it's going to be exciting, but again, if this was in a non-COVID situation, it would be insane. It would be insane. But limited fans, you got to see what they're going to do with tickets. I mean, it's going to be the Super Bowl, so they're going to hype it up, as much as they can. But if it was, like I said, a non-COVID situation, it would be a lot more crazy. But it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And then the game of the later game, which was Kansas City and Buffalo. Buffalo made it interesting, at least in the first quarter when they went up 9-0, and then Kansas City scores 21 answered points and basically takes control of the game, go on cruise control, and win the whole dang thing. At the end of the game, there was a lot of chippiness going on between the Bills offense and Kansas City's defense. The fun part is that they're actually going to play each other again next season at Arrowhead. So I'm kind of wondering if this game starts the season for the NFL on Thursday night in September.
This
could be kind of fun.
This could be the next big rivalry
Absolutely.
In the NFL that we're going to see. It's going to be, for years it was, in the NFC it was the Packers and the 49ers. Or the 49ers in the Cowboys. Now you have the Bills and these are obviously the Bills have never won a Super Bowl,
right?
And they suddenly are now in that position where they're going to be one of the favorites next year. The Chiefs will probably be the favorite to win the Super Bowl next year, especially if they win it this year. They'll be the favorites to win the Super Bowl next year. But the Bills suddenly they've pushed all the right buttons in that organization for the past 4 years. I mean, you talk about from drafting Josh Allen to getting Devin Singletary. Last year they brought in Frank Gore to mentor Singletary, and now they're just pushing all the right buttons, and good for the Bills to if I growing up I was a Jets fan, but it was always cool to see the Bills in the playoffs because I loved watching teams play in the snow. So.
Well, you grow up in this region, of course you're going to want to play. You don't want in the snow. You're going to want to play games in the snow. And speaking of the Jets, it's both our favorite team is the Jets. We had the press conference last week to introduce the new head coach, not Adam Gase, aka Robert Saleh. What's your impressions of him so far, Corey?
From the first impressions is it's all gas, no brake. I mean, that's what he's saying, and he's telling. And I love that. It feels like very Rex Ryan-esque, but not with the ego. It feels like this guy's got a plan, and he's going to want this team to be disciplined, be focused. I felt like it's a total opposite of Adam Gase, which is is great. He's going to have a lot of decisions to make. I mean, he's brought in, I think it was Mike LaFleur to be the offensive coordinator, and I believe he was a passing game specialist previously. So, I mean, you have to wonder what the Jets are going to do because there's a lot of things to do. Do you just tear it completely down, or do you try to build on what you have? I mean, obviously, Sam Darnold is going to be a hot topic. Do they trade him? Do they keep him? Do they bring somebody else in and let there be a quarterback competition? There's Deshaun Watson still floating around. But I think Saleh is going to be – I think he's going to turn this organization around. I think they needed a coach like this. Gase we all knew, and me and you talked about this at length before, Gase did not do well with the Dolphins, and there was no reason the Jets should have hired him.
No, if you're for someone like that to just get fired 3 weeks later, get a job, that and he had a lot of good references from a certain quarterback named Peyton Manning, who, by the way, will never ever be on my Christmas card list ever. He wound up getting him the job, but basically he said, "Oh, well, I know Adam Gase. He's an offensive guy. He's an offensive genius." Turns out that he wasn't, and it made a lot of Jets fans mad. And everybody remembers that infamous press conference where he had the taco meme press conference, where you just see him look at everyone in the room and just was like, "Oh my God, what am I getting myself into?" Where it's a different time right now with COVID, but when you sit down, you watch Robert Saleh talk to the press during his press conference, it's night and day. It's absolutely night and day. And he seems like the type of guy who the players are going to play for, who the players would run through. They would run through a bus to play for this guy. They would run through a wall. And I think that's what they just needed. They needed someone to be kind of a CEO type leader. Yeah, he'll delegate things to he'll delegate things to his different staff. You won't have him playing. You won't have him calling the defensive plays. He already said, "I'm not going to call the defensive plays. It's going to be by my coordinator. He's going to the offense take care of the offense, defense take care of the defense. He'll need to fill in where he needs to step in personnel wise where he needs to. He'll need to step in, make the game time decisions when he needs to, and it's a new day. It's a new day as a New York Jets fan, and yeah, it's gonna. And he said too, yeah, I want you to be patient. This might not take a year to rebuild. This might take a couple of years to rebuild. This might take 2-3 years, but once we get things going, this team's going to be unstoppable.
And that's what the Bills did.
Yeah,
that's exactly what the Bills did. You had to be patient with Sean McDermott. You had to be patient with Josh Allen. You just can't expect it to change overnight. Culture takes time to change. And, like a perfect example is as a Met fan, Sandy Alderson, when he came on board with the Mets, he changed the culture there. And that's the thing with a coach can change a culture pretty quickly. And we see that in college football a lot when these coaches get hired. Unfortunately, when they change the culture, they're usually gone that next season. So I think Saleh is going to be great for the Jets. I think, I'm excited about next year. I'm excited to see who they take in the draft. I'm excited to see if they can get Deshaun Watson somehow in a trade. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. But it's on his watch now. So he needs to, the first year, like I said, be patient. He needs to show the organization, the players, and the fans something. They have to be there. Be a fire. Even if they go out and they go 0-16, but they're competitive in every game. That's something to build on. Or so.
No, definitely. I'm pretty excited. I'm not sure what's going to happen this offseason. It's anybody's game. It's anybody's guess what's going to happen. Whether or not they go out and get Deshaun Watson, whether they take a bunch of their draft capital, take a bunch of their salary cap for the next couple of years and try to build around him, or do they keep Sam Darnold and they just keep building the offense and get it to something that Sam Darnold can work with? So that remains to be seen in the offseason. We'll see what happens from there. All right, we're going to move on to the NHL. And we'll talk about our favorite teams. Our favorite teams played each other, did a home and home this past week on Thursday and on Sunday. The Islanders and the Devils. Islanders took game 1, 4-1 on Thursday, and my New Jersey Devils shut out the Islanders on Sunday, 2-0. So let's talk about that game a little bit, Corey. Let's talk about first the Thursday game. The Islanders beating the Devils. They scored 2 power play goals in the third. The Islanders did, and went up basically walking away with this game 4-1. What was your impressions of that game? A lot of things. I'll give my thoughts on the Devils side, but before I give your thoughts about the Islanders, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it has to start with Semyon Varlamov. You're talking about a guy who's played, 3 games this season, allowed 1 goal. And and it was to Bastian, which you wouldn't have guessed that was going to be the guy that was going to score on him. There's a lot of other guys who would have, but he's been excellent. Their defense has been pretty excellent too. That shot that Bastian scored on, I believe, was a screen. It looked like it was a screen in front, and he just didn't see it. But really, if you look at the Islanders going into that game, before the game they played previously, the Islanders had a 5-goal. They gave up 5 goals in one game, but their goalies had allowed the least amount of goals in the NHL, and they had a good game. Right. So Varlamov's been on fire. The offense has been kind of struggling. They kind of came to life a little bit in that game, but not as consistent. You score 4 the one night, you get shut out the next night. Or 2 nights later. You can't have that. You have to be more consistent, especially if you want to make a run for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, game 1, the first game on Sunday was on Thursday. 2 power play goals in the third period, and the Islanders can play that suffocation game. They can play a suffocation game as good as anyone in the game, as good as any team. They allowed 31 shots, but Varlamov saved 30 of them. And that was the big difference, is that Varlamov is playing. He's playing on basically on his head right now. And Devils had their chances in on Thursday. Unfortunately, they couldn't They couldn't get past Varlamov, and that was the big deal. Now Sunday was a different story, and part of it, I think part of it was that Scott Wedgwood got pressed into action for the fact that Mackenzie Black was currently and still, from what I understand, he's on COVID protocol. Yeah. So he got pressed into action pretty quickly, and you had to prepare for the game, but at the same time, 4 goals get past you. That's a bad day. It's a bad day, no matter which goal, no matter who you are, no matter how good you are.
And kudos to him for coming back that next game and getting the shutout. I mean, that's big.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. So Sunday rolls around, and we go back to the Prudential Center, the Rock, and Devils scored 2 goals in the first period and never looked back. And Scott Wedgwood, again, another former Albany Devil. Shout out to the old Albany Devils. Rest in peace. They get the victory. They get the win for Wedgwood, and it was his first shutout, filling in for Blackwood. And actually, he's playing tonight, so I guess that means Wedgwood is still on COVID protocol for a couple days. Or Blackwood, excuse me. Blackwood is on protocol for another couple of days. But Devils played strong. They scored in the power play, which is what they need which is what they needed. They need to do because they brought in Mark Recchi to help with the power play, and it worked. And Jack Hughes scores another goal. He's got 7 points for the year. He's one of the better performers for the Devils this year. And I've got an article on bellyupsports.com talking about the 3 young players who have contributed to the Devils the most. But let's look at the Islanders side for a moment, Corey. What was your impressions of the Islanders play on Sunday?
Again, penalties are going to kill that team. I mean, you can't score on the power play, but you can't play shorthanded. I mean, the last 2 years, the Islanders, they get in penalty trouble, they get stupid penalties, and they allow other teams to capitalize. On the flip, their goaltending situation, and we text each other offline, but this, Corey Snyder was brought in to bring stability to the Islanders if Ilya Sorokin couldn't handle the duties as being a number 2. Mm-hmm. And Sorokin didn't play terrible in that game. Those 2 goals, he kind of settled in. But his angles, if you watch him, and he comes, in the KHL, they play on a bigger ice surface. His angles and his crease awareness were very off. Coming across the crease, it seems like he was lethargic, like he was too worried about the pass than worried about the shooter maybe. And his angles seemed way off. And, the Islanders have to, right now, obviously, is the reason Sorokin is in the NHL right now is because the AHL isn't playing yet. Are they just trying to get Sorokin some work at the NHL level? And then obviously when the AHL starts in a few weeks, is Sorokin going to be set down and Corey Snyder is going to be your number 2? If the Islanders want to make a run in the playoffs or deep into this season and have a top seed, they need a number 2. Greiss left. He's in Detroit. Sorokin, at this point, I don't think he can handle a number 2 duty. I just don't. I would feel more comfortable as an Islanders fan having Corey Snyder as my number 2.
Yeah. Schneider's got that load of NHL experience. Believe me, as a guy who watched / listened to Devils games over the past couple of years, and the reason why he was brought in, Lou Lamoriello traded for him back back a bunch of years ago. Thought he could be the number 1 goaltender. He was for a while. Injuries kind of set him back a little bit, and right now he is he's playing for the Islanders. So hopefully he'll get a chance to get some time in before the season's end. Especially have Sorokin play in the AHL for a bit. So we're gonna move on to baseball. We've had some signings recently, but the one big story is that breaking news as of an hour ago, we're recording on Tuesday night, as of an hour ago, for the first time since 1960, the membership of the National Baseball Hall of Fame will remain frozen as no player from the 2021 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot reached the 75% threshold needed for enshrinement in Cooperstown. The closest one who got there.
Who are they?
The closest one who got there was Curt Schilling. He had 71% of the ballots. He had 16 votes to get in. And then after that was Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. They were the top three. They couldn't reach the 75% threshold.
I mean, it just shows you that the players who I feel like the players from that generation, the great ones, have already gotten in. I mean, you're starting to get down into the players, the second tier of players. I mean, is Curt Schilling really a Hall of Famer? I mean, he put a couple good seasons or a few good seasons together late in his career. When you say Hall of Fame, I don't think Curt Schilling. Bonds and Clemens, they're just a totally different situation. I mean, obviously steroid era. Are they going to get in? I mean, I think eventually they will. But when you have Mark Burley on the ballot, I mean, I know a lot of players just get on the ballot because they have to have a bunch of guys on there. But like you're talking about like Mark Burley getting in the Hall of Fame. I mean, what did you have the list in front of you of the players that were on it? I mean, it's crazy. It's some of these players are like you're just scratching your head saying that guy wasn't even really an all-star. How is he a Hall of Fame? Like, come on. So it doesn't shock me at all that nobody's going this year. It really does. I didn't think anyone would.
Okay, so here's the list of the 25. Well, there's 25 players who are on the list. Let me give you the top 10 of the votes. So Curt Schilling, 70% of the ballots, 16 votes short of getting in the Hall of Fame. Here's his stat line: 216 career wins, career ERA of 3.46. He had over 3,000 strikeouts, 3,116 strikeouts. Roger Clemens was number 2, 61%, 354 wins, 4,672 career strikeouts. Barry Bonds was next, followed by Omar Vizquel, Scott Rowland, Billy Wagner, Gary Sheffield, Todd Helton, Manny Ramirez, and Jeff Kent. That was your top 10.
And you look at Jeff Kent. I mean, I'm a Met fan, and you know Jeff Kent did all his great stuff in his career not with the Mets. And you know, he had a great, if you really look at his stats and what he did, he was a great player. I mean, so was, you know, Todd Helton. But Todd Helton, again, he played in Colorado, so I'm sure people kind of looking at that a little bit saying, hey,
no,
he played in Colorado.
So what? So what? That's my comeback. So what?
Yeah, exactly.
The thin air didn't hit all those home runs. I always say the same thing for Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds, the steroids didn't hit those home runs. The steroids didn't throw all those strikeouts. It was the person.
Yeah, but
the pitcher.
Look at the splits on Helton when we get a chance. We'll look at the splits on Helton.
Okay, so Helton batting at 2,247 games. He had 2,519 hits, 369 home runs, 1,406 RBIs, 1,335 walks, slugging percentage 539, on base and slugging 953. Those aren't bad stats.
But are they Hall of Fame stats? Who are they comparable to? That's in the Hall of Fame.
Good question. I don't have the list in front of me, but yeah. That's a very good question. I mean, Barry Bonds. I think Barry Bonds. I mean, there's a number of people a number of players who I think should be in the Hall of Fame.
Should Billy Wagner be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, he was a closer for, a pretty dominant closer for, for like 5 or 6 years. But, do you think I mean, those names to me just don't scream Hall of Fame. I mean, obviously, the names of like Derek Jeter, that's a Hall of Famer. Vlad Guerrero I mean, they're Hall of Famers now, but I mean, when those guys come from the same generation, these players, and maybe, I'm just bitter because there's no Mets on that list, but there shouldn't be. But to me, it just seems like they just put people in to put people in. And maybe this year they just didn't need to.
Okay. Billy Wagner should be on the Hall of Fame. He's 6th all-time in career saves, 422. Mo Rivera's in the Hall of Fame. Trevor Hoffman's in the Hall of Fame. Lee Smith is in the Hall of Fame. Dennis Eckersley, who he has more, he's in the Hall of Fame. Raleigh Fingers. He should be in the Hall. Billy Wagner should be in the Hall of Fame. Absolutely.
He's a Met.
And he's a Met too. And he's a Met. And he was a Met. So you can't say you can't be that bitter that nobody from the Mets is on that list. But Billy Wagner should be a Hall of Famer. All right, so we're gonna move on from sports and go into pop culture. And Corey had a really interesting pop culture subject for this week. So this week we're going to talk about pop culture. We're going to talk about movies. We're going to talk about movies that should have never gotten a sequel. Should never get a sequel. Movies that should get a sequel, and movies that should have never had a sequel in the first place. So Corey, since this is the topic you came up with, I'm going to have you take the con on this one. Have you go first. Which movie should have gotten a sequel? Which movie should have never gotten a sequel, and which movies should have never had a sequel in the first place?
So I'll just do a couple for each. So this is based on the fact that we've reviewed a lot of, Cobra Kai obviously is a sequel to Karate Kid, even though it's a series. We talked about Bill and Ted, Face the Music. Yep. So I was looking, and let me preface by saying gaps between the original to the sequel. Let's start that way, because obviously Karate Kid had a pretty significant gap. Bill and Ted had a significant gap. So here are the ones. So what we're going to start with, the ones that should get a sequel
but never got one.
Okay. So these are the ones that you're going to hate me on a couple of these. You really are. Because I'm all right.
Try me.
Yeah. The first one I'm going to start with, and people are going to be like, no. And let me start. It can be a sequel or a prequel, because it could explain backstories too.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Goonies.
I knew you were going to say that.
Okay.
So I knew you were going to say that. No, I don't hate you. I'm okay with it.
Okay. So here was always my thought about Goonies. So I don't think they should ever go in a direction of making a sequel. I just don't think it would be that's 35 years ago or 37. I mean, you're talking about generational thing. I think they should do a prequel about One-Eyed Willie and about Chester Copperpot.
Okay.
I think that they should do a series called Willie or Chester or Copperpot. I think that would be from a Goonies point of view, I think that'd be pretty cool to see these people. And that's how I feel. I think if you don't want to make a sequel, make something a little different. And I think people will gravitate towards it. A movie that I think there should be a sequel made of, and there wasn't. Now, this is kind of a sequel on top of a sequel, is Batman with Michael Keaton. I think, and I know there's a lot of talks in the works that there's a possibility of this, but I think how they left after Batman Returns was they kind of left like a void. It would be cool to see Michael Keaton reprise the role of Batman 30-something years later. I just think that would be... he would definitely be able to make up for some of these other, and you could keep it in that same universe. I don't know if the other ones that came after, like Batman Beyond and Batman and Robin, you just forget about those. Mm-hmm. Another show that I think they should make another one, again, a sequel on top of a sequel, Austin Powers.
Okay, continue.
So the only problem is obviously Vern Troyer has since passed on, Mini-Me.
Right.
But I love those movies. They were so funny, and they made fun of everything. And it's something that we need in this day and age is to kind of make fun of ourselves instead of taking ourselves too seriously. So that's why I think Austin Powers. And, they were just funny. They make me laugh. Every time I see them on TV, I just have to turn them on. Now, do you have yours?
Okay. Think off the top of my head. So, I mean, Goonies... yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was a Warner Brothers movie, if I remember correctly. So yep. I know Warner has their own, with HBO. That could be an HBO Max series about Cheshire Copperpot or One-Eyed Willie. Yeah, that could be an HBO Max series. I mean, I don't have HBO Max, but that would be a nice series.
Yeah.
One movie is gonna be kind of off the wall, but I think should get a kind of a reprise more than a sequel. Is Mr. Baseball with Tom Selleck. I don't know if you ever saw that before, Corey. Have you ever seen Mr. Baseball?
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago, but yeah, I've seen it.
Okay. I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was a funny movie. For kids who's in high school or college, watch that movie. It would have been kind of fun. It would have been kind of fun to see his character go back to Japan and be a manager. I would want to see him as a manager, managing as a gaijin as a white man. White devil. The white devil goes back to Japan and manages a baseball team, and to see like kind of a culture shock between, uh, not so much culture shock, but generation gap between his time and players of today. I would totally, I would watch something like that. Make it kind of a reprise of Tom Selleck in there. And come on, Tom Selleck.
Yeah, he's still out there acting. He's still out there acting.
Yeah. He's on. He was on Blue Bloods as of recently. So, one movie. So that's one movie that should kind of get a sequel, but also kind of going back off your Goonies idea, get a kind of a reprise or a reboot. One movie that should never get a sequel. It's kind of part of the trilogy, but the Cornetta and Blood trilogy, the Blood and Cornetta trilogy of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. Yep. Hot Fuzz should never get a sequel. Yep. That movie is perfect the way it is, with Simon Pegg and Ian Wright and Jim Broadbent as the kind of not knowing but also knowing chief of police in a small quiet town in the north of England. That movie's just perfect. It's perfect. The comedy's on point. The acting's really well. The acting's really good. The plot works. Perfect. It should never get a movie. And it should never get a sequel. And the movies that should have never gotten a sequel, The Matrix. The Matrix, the first Matrix movie, where we get Neo, we explain where he's from, we explain how he becomes Neo, great. The two movies that came after that, terrible. Absolutely. An absolute mind F from part A, from pillar to post. And some of the battle scenes were pretty cool with the giant robots shooting at the Sentinels. That was pretty cool. But the whole the whole story of Neo in the Nebuchadnezzar with Trinity, their weird love story, the whole thing with Zion going to war with the machines, it was just ham-fisted and and the whole philosophy thing just didn't work. If I could go back in time with the Wachowski brothers, now the Wachowski sisters, and talk about that movie and how the premise of that, how it should have been taking place, I think it should have been done better. And that movie did not deserve the two movies that came afterward, because The Matrix was a great movie, first of all, and what happened after that, I wish never happened.
So mine are the ones that they should have never made sequels to. I have actually a few of them. Yeah. I'm just going to read them off real quick. Ghostbusters, they're making a sequel to Afterlife. Obviously it's not out yet. I just don't think they should have. That was too long of a gap. Jurassic Park, I didn't like how they did Jurassic World, especially the sequel of Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, wasn't very good. Bill and Ted last week, I obviously didn't like that. The one that I'm really upset about was Clerks 2. Clerks 2 I just was like, this is just awful. Like they should have never did this. They work in a restaurant now, and the humor, they try to make the humor the same, but it came out like 15 years after the other one. They're older now. It's like they're a bunch of losers. I didn't like that. The movies that I hope they never make into a sequel, and I really have one, and it's another Kevin Smith movie. There's two, but one in particular. I don't think Coming to America should be coming out. I think that's just going to be really weird. And that's actually coming out. But the one Kevin Smith
it's another gap. It's another too long of a gap too.
Yeah. Is Mallrats, which is one of my favorite movies. The way that movie was and the humor in that movie, you can't go 26 years into the future and try. And rumor has it they are going to try to have a sequel to that. And I watched it the other day and I'm like, you can't do this. I'm like, you can't. Brody is so immature that if you even make him somewhat immature in this new movie, it's going to be terrible. You just can't do it. And I hope they don't, because there are some gold mines like Cobra Kai did really well. Even American Reunion. I don't know if you watched American Reunion. American Reunion was pretty good. The American Pie sequel that came out, I think, like 11 or 12 years after the original. But there's just certain movies you can't too much of a gap. You just can't do it. The Indiana Jones in the Crystal Kingdom, the Crystal Skull, too much of a gap.
That was way too long of a gap. Yeah, so that's one of the big debates that we had this week. I'd be curious to see what our listeners would say too. But we're going to wrap things up for this week's episode of No Credentials Required. Again, we are brought to you by Belly Up Sports and a part of the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. If you get a chance, go back and listen to last week's shows. I did a special with Down to the Wire on a Worldwide Sports Radio Network. I took the audio from that and I put an episode from that. We also had episode 21 of No Credentials Required from last week. And I also had a special with an interview with Sean Patrick Flannery, who people might know from Boondock Saints and from Powder. He released a new movie called Born a Champion. I got a chance to watch it this weekend. It's actually a really good movie. If you're into martial arts movies, go watch that movie. It's an excellent movie. I'll probably write up a review on that this week on BellyUpSports.com. But in the meantime, we've got other podcasts you can check out. We've got more podcasts that we're actually adding on. One podcast in particular that I want to give a shout out to is the Cannons and Tomahawks podcast. Every Saturday, Alex Nuttall, who is a Columbus Blue Jackets fan, and Zach Martin, who is a Chicago Blackhawks fan, they talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Chicago Blackhawks with a small mix of NHL talk thrown in for good measure. It's a show full of chirps, goal celebrations, plus much more. Sit back, grab a beer or two, and enjoy some hockey talk from two diehard fans in the Midwest. And again, Belly Up Sports is adding on more and more podcasts by the week. We're aiming for a big year this year, and podcasts are just a part of that. So check out the podcasts on the page on bellyupsports.com. And you can catch my live show, which is around for the weekend every Friday night, or most Friday nights at 6:30 on Periscope, on Facebook Live, and on YouTube. This week I'm going to have my buddy Tom Gozlowski, formerly of 104.5, the team ESPN in Albany. We're going to talk about his new podcast, and it's that's what's going on in our world. So, Corey, any final thoughts for this week?
Stop making bad sequels, people.
Amen. So on that note, we're going to end this week's podcast. And again, thanks for listening to No Credentials Required. Please visit our socials, the social media pages on Twitter, Belly Up Sports. It's at Belly Up NCR. On Facebook, it's Belly Up Sports NCR. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, we'll save you a seat in the media booth. Intro and outro music is On the Verge by Joseph McDade. Check out his music and support him on Patreon at patreon.com/Joseph McDade. Thank you for listening to No Credentials Required, powered by Belly Up Sports and a part of the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. For more articles and podcasts, visit bellyupsports.com.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.